the lush green all around us and the wondrous sights within. It's in the distinct aroma of our cooking to the taste of food that takes you on a journey. In the sound of homecoming and the sound of Mother Earth. In the magnificence we find on our travels and the exciting moments we experience. Ours is the kind of beauty that comes in all things big and small. All we have to do is awaken our senses and truly enjoy what's uniquely ours. Explore Uganda, the pearl of Africa.
One-on-one with Michael Jordan Lukomwa.
A weekly face-to-face conversation focusing on accountability, inspiration, information, and sensitization of the public from the various sources such as inspirational profiles.
Having a disability is not inability.
Professional guidance.
There is no special antiretroviral therapy that is given specifically for discordant couples.
And of course, politics.
Don't you see anywhere that you would give a credit in the fight against COVID?
My role as the owner of the country is not to, be preoccupied by giving credit to my servant.
We have said that if we are to talk to General Museveni, there must be certain conditions in place.
Is it true that you paid 5 million shillings to MPs that voted for Anita Mong and Tayebo?
That is laughable. Why would we pay when we have nominated them as SEC?
Every party has been represented in Uganda's parliament for 10 years. We only by one MP. You yourself and my daughter, Susan.
Every Friday 9 p.m. it's one-on-one with Michael Jordan Lukomwa on UBC TV, inspiring Uganda.
When you talk about our motherland Uganda, the pearl of Africa, you cannot fail to smile because of the smile that fills the faces of the citizens. Our nice good weather and nature that sustains us all, that enables us all to continue each in their own way because we are all different even according to each individual's work. But what joins us to become one person is the sweetness from the flavored drink Alleluia Jingati drink and Alleluia Tamarind drink. The flavor that quenches your thirst while at the same time treating and healing your body because it is 100% natural. Enjoy the drink that has got the tamarind juice in it. Made by Alleluia Reflexology, Healthy Solutions and Nutritional Research Center Limited. Get yourself a bottle of Alleluia from all shops around.
The Universal Periodic Review is a process under the United Nations Human Rights System which involves the peer review of the human rights records of all United Nations member states every 4 years. As the coordinating entity, the National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders Uganda, in partnership with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, has organized a 2-day stakeholder engagement under the theme the UPR in Uganda, towards a collective and coordinated action in implementing the UPR recommendations. The chief guest will be the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Honorable General Abubakar JJ Odong. This will take place on the 30th to the 31st of August 2022. For more information, contact the National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders Uganda on email info@hrdcoalition.ug.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Good morning and thank you for keeping it with us here on UBC TV. That is something I can never get tired to thank you. From the hour of 6:30 till now, you're with us and you're continuing with us. Some are actively participating on our various social media platforms. Thank you so much. Welcome to Good Morning Uganda Extra, an extension of Good Morning Uganda. And I'm Robert Chirabonyonyintono. This time I'm honored to have a team of 3. And these are people that handle issues regarding human rights. Now we know that our country is a signatory to a number of global or UN charters, most when it comes to human rights. But today I want to examine a number of these commitments. How far have we gone as a country to ensure we implement them, or are we just a signatory? Well, we have what is known as the Universal Periodic Review. This is something that requires countries to submit reports on some of these resolutions. What have they taken on? What are they not taking on? And also remember, it's not all about taking them on, but domesticating them and applying them. So joining me on set this morning, I have Sharon Nakanwaji, who happens to be the Program Manager, National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders, Uganda. Nakanwaji.
Good morning, our
Good
viewers.
morning.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure having you. And then next to her, I have Alana Kembabazi, Initiative for Social and Economic Rights Program Manager. You're most welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
And at the extreme end, I have Biona Bie Kamadi, who happens to be from the Uganda Human Rights Commission, and he's the Director, Research, Education and Documentation. You're most welcome.
Thank you, Robert. The name is Bionavie. I see you struggling to pronounce it. And good morning to our viewers.
Well, I'll start with, now that my viewers are aware of the team I have, all of them, you hear there's an attachment with human rights. So we are going to be basically discussing human rights, but also, to be more specific, that is the Universal Periodic Review report. There is a conference that's just ended, and I'm very sure these were some of the things that they're deliberating on. But I'll begin with Nakanwaji. When we talk about Universal Periodic Review, to our viewers who have no idea of this, what are we referring to?
Okay, thank you. So the Universal Periodic Review is a process whereby different member states review the human rights record of fellow countries and fellow states regarding what has been transpiring, what is the human rights situation that has been going on in that country. So member states, apart from the other systems that the UN uses, this particular one, different member countries or member states come in to review the human rights situation of a certain country, and they give recommendations to that country upon which the country should take note or follow through to ensure that there's an improved human rights record in that country. So as for Uganda, we have just gone through our third cycle of the Universal Periodic Review process. This happens, the cycle happens every after 4 years. A report is generated. It is a state-driven process. Thus, Uganda itself compiles a national report regarding the recommendations that have been given to Uganda. What is it that they have done about the human rights situation in Uganda? So that report is then submitted at the UN Human Rights Council, and different member states then react and give recommendations that Uganda either takes on and accepts, or it can decide to note them and not accept them. So following the third cycle that just took place, we organized a conference as the National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders Uganda towards a coordinated and collaborative response, because human rights issue concerns all of us. And for this to be attained, for the human rights situation in Uganda to be improved, it's something that involves all of us to partner and work together as civil society, as the government, as the state, as the religious entities, the members of parliament, different stakeholders. So this conference was geared towards bringing all of us together to understand what are the recommendations that we have received from this Universal Periodic Review, and what are we going to do about them, how are we going to work together to monitor the implementation of these recommendations.
Now, this takes me to Kamadi from the Uganda Human Rights Commission. Now, with the recent review of the United Nations Human Rights Council to Uganda, are there some challenges or specific gaps that really you feel maybe are hindering us effectively implementing these? What is your analysis from that government or state body?
Well, I thought we would first talk of achievements before going to challenges, but the Universal Periodic Review has been of great help to us as a country because it seeks to buttress and strengthen commitments at national level by government itself and all actors. I thought I should start with that. The recommendations that government accepted to take on, as highlighted by my colleague here, one of the major ones seeks to develop a national action plan on human rights. That is a commitment that had been taken on earlier on in the previous reviews, but it faced challenges even with the advent of COVID. But now, shortly after the most recent review in January this year, the report has now been adopted just in July, and therefore we are looking forward to finalizing the National Action Plan on Human Rights, where all government ministries, departments and agencies, including civil society, will be moving together as a country with one voice, a renewed commitment to protect and promote human rights in Uganda. And that said, of course, there are always implementation challenges. You need resources if you are to take such an agenda forward. And as you know, resources, needs are endless and resources are always scarce. So that is one of the most, one of the challenges that we are likely to face, or we are actually facing already. It will have to take a lot of financial commitment to ensure that the National Action Plan on Human Rights is first of all approved and at the same time implemented.
Then this brings me to Kembabazi. When we talk about human rights, one of the things that comes to my mind is social and, of course, economic rights. And also I'd like you to help us understand how relevant are they to Uganda, and more so when we are looking at actually that is the UPR.
I often say that socio-economic rights are how Ugandans feel the state or understand human rights. When you go to a village and anyone who you begin to ask, what do you need, what should the government do? It's usually healthcare. Oh, there are no drugs in our hospitals, there are no healthcare workers. Our children are able to go to school. The school fees right now, children are going to school, right? You're starting, the school fees is high. We've been talking about it, the cost of living, where are you going to get the money? And this is what socioeconomic rights are. They talk about you having the right to education, regardless of ability to pay. You having the right to health care, regardless of ability to pay. You know, social protection, when COVID-19 hit and you could not work, or are older persons, those grants you give, you know, those things to cushion you, to make sure you can live with dignity. That is what socioeconomic rights are. And they are very relevant to this process. As ISA, in 2011, when Uganda first went its first review, we realized these countries are not asking about socioeconomic rights. Yet most of Ugandans, these are the challenges they face on a day-to-day, regardless of your gender, political affiliation. You will fail to get healthcare in this country. Because yesterday we were learning that people are sleeping on the steps of the Cancer Institute. Do you know why? There are no regional cancer centers, so they all come here. Then it is packed, there are not enough doctors. So now they are there, they spend days without getting treatment, they go back. These are issues affecting Ugandans. So we purpose to make sure that these countries know the real state of our socioeconomic rights. We have statistics, but sometimes you forget. You know, when you hear 1 in 5 Ugandans are poor, you know, you may be like, okay, but what does that mean? It means in this group of people here, if we are 5, one of us cannot afford a meal, enough to sustain ourselves. So we brought the government's data to this process, and we asked a lot of these countries and reflected the real realities on the ground, because Ugandans asked us to speak for them. And we've seen a lot of recommendations since then. In 2016, which was the second review, there was a lot of attention by states telling Uganda, please focus on this. Uganda, to its credit, has done things. It introduced free education, at least it introduced UPE and USE. But you all know that it is not free. It should be free. And the president was right on it. But why is it not free? Because you're not giving enough money to the schools. The capitation grants are low, 10,000 shillings per child, things like that. So the result is that the fees are then passed on to the parents in the form of school fees. And the idea was supposed to be that regardless of your ability to pay, you can have education. So we thought it was important to highlight these gaps, and states have given recommendations on that. On healthcare, they said, but Uganda, why don't you do a national health insurance scheme? Why don't you equip your public health facilities, make sure they're healthcare workers? And you know, after they make these recommendations, sometimes you want to see what is happening. So what happened 5 years later, now I'm coming to tell you. Very little actually changed. So we found ourselves as civil society going back and saying, the situation is actually worse than before. Yes, there may be improvements, but now COVID-19 came. So we saw what happened last year. We saw that when you don't have a public health system, whether you're rich or poor, you're going to suffer. Because we saw people dying, rich or poor, because they could not get oxygen, because there was an oxygen crisis. There are no oxygen plants. We saw that you may think like Alana, you have some money, you're salaried, but you just get sick, you get COVID like this. How many of you can afford a private healthcare? You know what happened with the private profiteering last year. So we realized, and then for those of you who had some money, you realize now your business is not doing as well. You thought you could afford your private school, but you can't. In fact, private schools have told us they have more data than before, and more people are running the public schools. So more than ever, we need to see public health care, public education, social protection, not just for the old people, but for Uganda to have a real, you know, right now there's a cost of living crisis. And we've been telling government, how are you cushioning people? Because they don't know where the vulnerable are, so they're not acting. So we say there are gaps in financing, there are gaps in data. We need to make sure we do better for our people. So you see these recommendations come back. But however, since 2016, there was some change. For example, in 2016, Uganda was asked to develop a national action plan on business and human rights. Remember, you've been hearing sometimes investors come, they evict people, sometimes when using all kinds of forces without asking their free, prior and informed consent. You just see someone coming from nowhere. You find people, again, the profiteering that happened, for example, by private hospitals where it's the right to life, but you're putting profit. So Uganda government, to its credit, worked with civil society like ISA, with the Human Rights Commission, and did nationwide consultations on this issue. And they developed last year, you should check on their website, Ministry of Gender's website, a national action plan on business and human rights. So that shows you that when recommendations are made and there is action, concerted action, change can happen. And part of why we saw some of those changes is, you know, it's very important. These recommendations, when they make them, they're very broad. Continue to take measures to improve healthcare. How do you, a Ugandan, monitor this? So what we did was we sat with government and we came up with an implementation matrix. We said, government, let us look at the baseline data. You have the data in your reports, whether it's health sector, annual health sector performance report, you know, you already have the data. So you put the data there, the baseline of where it is at. This was 2016. Then come and update. By the time it's getting to 2021, like they did, or we even did some midterm review internal in 2018. You put the data, so to yourself you can know. You can see, I was giving this percentage of financing to healthcare, we are now here, because that is how you know progress. Then we asked indicators on progress, so that's what helped us see some change.
Okay, that was said. However, it brings me back to Sharon. I'm eager to understand, much as you've explained to us the Universal Periodic Review, but for a third world country like Uganda, you know, most of the times I tell human rights activists that yes, we know they are universal by virtue of being a human being. You're entitled to these rights without any other obstacle. Though I'm also a personal advocate for responsibility as well, not just saying it is my right to feel upset, then you go and you undress for people because you feel offended. But getting back to why do we really, as a country, need to have these reviews? What relevance are they to us, also considering, yes, that we are a third world country?
Okay, so the ultimate reason for this review, the Universal Periodic Review, is to improve the human rights situation in our country. And this UPR process it's not a forced process like this is a treaty that you have signed, but we agree among ourselves as member states. A state gives you a recommendation, please Uganda look into this. So Uganda voluntarily accepts, we will do this, we will do this. So it is important to us because Uganda itself has committed together with other states and said, yes, we will address this. If it's an issue of civil and political rights, we will address this. If it's an issue of resourcing the Uganda Human Rights Commission and other institutions, we'll address this. So this is very important to us as a country, because Uganda in itself goes and commits itself willingly without being forced and says, yes, this is a recommendation that has been given unto us, therefore we shall address it. So there's that willingness. It's upon us as a country to hold on to that and work with that kind of support and that kind of willingness and that zeal to improve our situation in the country. It is not a matter of I am forcing you to do this, I am following up with you, you said this, you have to do this, but just because we have committed as a country, so it is good for us, because then we will check ourselves and we see how far have we gone, and it involves all of us in this process. So it is important, the UPR is important to us, because once Uganda has acknowledged that yes, we will do this, we work on that zeal and willingness with different entities, different ministries, different departments, different agencies, to see that whatever Uganda has committed is upheld, because there will be another review at the end of that. If Uganda said we will improve on this and this, we will improve on the vulnerable, we will improve on the general.
These reviews, 5 years, how often are they carried out? It's
a cycle of 4 years.
Okay.
So after that, we will appear as Uganda at the UN Human Rights Council to give feedback on to what we have done regarding these recommendations that we accepted. So if you accepted to resource these certain institutions, what is the progress so far? What have you done about it? So because you also want to appear there with a good record, Uganda has to be mindful to do something about what they have accepted. So that is the very essence of it and the importance of it. Because at the end of it all, it's geared towards improving our human rights situation. So you know that maybe as a country, different reports are going to be generated, and different countries will ask you, what about this? What about torture? What about these issues? What are you doing about this? So Uganda as a country is ready to give a good report about itself. So that's why it is important to us to follow through and monitor as CSOs and whoever, so that by the time Uganda comes up for review, the next time after this process, we have worked to improve the situation on ground.
Well, now this brings me to Kamadi. You're in charge of protecting, monitoring, supervisions. The Commission is the steward almost of human rights in Uganda. When you look at the Universal Periodic Review, what is your role in here as the Commission?
Like you've rightly put it, the Uganda Human Rights Commission is the national human rights institution charged with the cardinal role of protecting and promoting human rights in Uganda. So, our role starts with monitoring the human rights situation. We also make a report as a national human rights institution that is prepared alongside the government report and that of the civil society, as it has been said. And in that regard, throughout the 3 cycles, we've been preparing that report and appearing before the Human Rights Council in Geneva. That aside, we help government in also preparing its report, because the Commission is a watchdog. So we work with the government and provide the necessary expertise at the different MDAs level, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Gender. Like she has said, in coming up with the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights, our participation was very key, and we were there at every stage up to its launch. Now, it doesn't stop at that. We follow up these recommendations. We monitor the implementation and follow-up actions. How has government implemented the various actions, giving the necessary technical expertise? That is one of the aspects we do. Article 52 of the Constitution mandates the Commission to create awareness, human rights education, because you cannot defend rights you do not know. Awareness is very, very key. And we talk about protection and promotion. Promotion is about preventative measures to forestall there would be violations. Instead of waiting for violations to occur and you come in, yes, it is important for those whose rights have been violated to be helped, to be compensated, and that kind of thing. But it would be very good to prevent, as they say, prevention is better than cure. So we create awareness. Even this exercise we are on right now is part of the awareness creation, so that people get to know about this mechanism and how to use the available mechanism. For instance, we have also worked with the National Planning Authority to ensure that human rights is mainstreamed in the national planning processes. We had human rights integrated in NDP 1, NDP 2, and now NDP 3 to ensure that all government programs, policies, plans are human rights based, because the outcome is as good as the process. Actually, when the process is human rights based, you are assured of a human rights based outcome. That is the importance of mainstreaming human rights in all government programs, policies, and plans. The plan is anchored on a particular human rights standard. It is anchored on a particular commitment that government accepted, for instance, during the Universal Periodic Review. And then when that is done, then it becomes very easy for it to be financed, because it is already in the plan. It's not an ad hoc thing. And whoever is implementing that plan has a mindset consciously that the particular project I'm embarking on is going to contribute A, B, C, D to realization of the right to health, to realization of the right to education, to improving security, fighting against poverty, and etc. As you know, poverty is one of the causes of human rights violations.
Definitely.
Yeah, so that is the work we do, monitoring the state of human rights, educating the masses, but also at institutional level, we handle complaints of human rights violations to ensure that people whose rights have been violated get the required accountability.
Now this brings me to Alana. Uganda was reviewed, that is in January this very year, but are there any supported recommendations in the area of social and economic rights?
There are so many. I have a whole list, and I'll break them down in categories of education, healthcare, social protection, the business and human rights issues I was referring to with regard to how the country balances when it has investors and human rights, and others really around strengthening financing for things like the Human Rights Commission. But this, I want to underscore that these issues that they brought out in the recommendations are not new. We had many recommendations on redoubling efforts to ensure quality free education. There was even one which said make primary education compulsory, which means you'd have to make it quality and free, right? When it comes to healthcare, it is the same thing we have been shouting about. Maternal mortality, increased financing for healthcare. When it comes to social protection, it talks about having data for social protection, widening the coverage of social protection. You know how we now only cover people who are above 80 with SAGE, yet we know when you're above 60, if you can retire at 60, why do they make you now only need to be 80 years to get only SAGE? Things like that. So we have a lot of recommendations. ISA's website has a booklet where we broke them down by sector, and I wish we could have had the foresight to broadcast them. And then the issue of accountability also comes out. To take measures to ensure accountability of public services. Remember the issue that came up with COVID-19 money? And people were asking, where is the accountability? And this is important because you need money to realize these rights. You need to devote maximum available resources. So you don't want money to be lost to corruption somewhere, because it means every time a shilling is diverted here, a woman is dying in a hospital because there is no drug or healthcare worker. So those are some of the things that they were really looking at and arguing. And again, I kept saying, they say the same things. And that's why I agree with my colleague when we say we should mainstream it. Right now we are in the budget process. So budget consultation process for the next year. If you're not aware, please get in touch with your local governments or wherever it is supposed to be participatory. So what we should be seeing is, if they say financing for education, we should be seeing this concretely in the budget. Don't just tell us the education sector has increased, because the recommendation says quality free education. So we should look at how much is going to these schools. Are the teachers paid? In the health facilities, are there drugs? You know, those consumables they need to clean. So when you're doing your budgeting as government, you know you have this recommendation. Meanwhile, the recommendation is the same thing you're also saying are gaps in your annual sector performance reports. So therefore, you should accordingly plan because you have to prioritize. And that is what we are seeing. So for me, it makes me happy that they're not new issues. And I keep saying this, human rights are not these things. I remember after 2016, we went around the country, government was doing consultations on the optional protocol on economic, social and cultural rights, and it invited ISA for expertise to share. And someone said, these are UN things. I said, no, they are not. They are human rights. They are things you need to live in dignity. They are given to you because you are human. And you pay taxes in some way or the other. You wonder why some of these prices are up. You're paying tax every time you're buying some buto here, some. So you should be demanding accountability for some of those things. The money should be used to ensure you live a dignified life. So that even if you're poor today, or you fall in poverty, you retire, maybe you are wealthy, but now you've retired, the money has run out, you're able to get certain basics. So we need to see that government is budgeting for this to make it a reality, and it's planning for it, and you as the people, you should keep monitoring, because when something is your right, if someone comes to your property and they try to take it, you will defend it. So if your healthcare feels like it's under threat, or your education or your social protection, you must make sure that people, you remind government, you have a social contract with government. You're supposed to pay tax and be an law-abiding citizen, and they're supposed to make sure you're able to live in dignity. So
very clear there, you pay tax. These are rights, but of course they have financial implications, like Kamadi told us. And that will go with depending how do you cut a coat according to your piece of cloth. I think that's also another factor that comes in.
Can I also just quickly add that in fact, and I want to say this because right now Ministry of Finance is having a consultation. I'll be going shortly on financing a resilient economy. Yes, they have financial implications, but at your home, even if you're low on money, you try to make sure you have your portion bins, because people have to eat. So what we're saying is, if all you're doing
and have nothing to eat.
No, but what I'm saying to you is, as a family member now, when you're planning, you always make sure there are basics at home. Right? So when you're government and you're planning, you must make sure there are certain things that are building blocks. If you don't educate these children, then you're going to be fighting poverty. Every time putting money in poverty alleviation, up to what extent? So you must make sure you find the money, you dedicate, and from a human rights perspective, we call it maximum available resources. It means you curb the corruption. It means you really scrutinize. Is money leaving the country? We saw what happened with COVID, and you see people coming, the president joked about it. At least the money is not leaving the country. It's being stolen, but it's within the economy and circulating. But imagine you curbed all those leakages. Imagine we've talked about taxation. People are shouting, whenever we get taxes, it's the same people being burdened. Imagine you're making the wealthy pay their fair share of tax. You're looking at some of these tax exemptions that are costing the country a lot of money. Yesterday we were talking about trillions. I realized the tax exemptions of 2019 could have financed our social protection 8.5 times. So there is money. We have to make sure we are curbing leakages and making people pay their fair share of tax, and we are also allocating and making sure we prioritize. We prioritize security, we can prioritize healthcare, we can prioritize education. You need all of them to have a safe society.
Well, I liked the way Kamadi was nodding and saying, yes, if we only get that money, if we get our priorities right. But let me just go for a short break. When we return, we'll still be discussing more regarding, that is the Universal Periodic Review, where Uganda was reviewed. That was just in January, not very far, this very year. And of course, our status. Now there, we will be looking at some of these recommendations. What did we take and what did we not? We return shortly.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
The Universal Periodic Review is a process under the United Nations human rights system which involves the peer review of the human rights records of all United Nations member states every 4 years. As the coordinating entity, the National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders Uganda, in partnership with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, has organized a 2-day stakeholder engagement under the theme, the UPR in Uganda, towards a collective and coordinated action in implementing the UPR recommendations. The chief guest will be the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Honorable General Abubakar JJ Odong. This will take place on the 30th to the 31st of August 2022. For more information, contact the National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders Uganda on email info@hrdcoalition.ug.
National Council for Higher Education will hold the 4th Annual Higher Education Conference on the 14th and 15th September 2022. The conference theme is Enhancement of Teaching, Learning and Assessment with Ordeal in Higher Education. The guest of honor will be the First Lady and Minister of Education and Sports, Honorable Janet Kataha Museveni. The conference will be held physically at Hotel Africana for only invited guests and open to online participants via Zoom webinar that will be shared under the events section at www.unche.or.ug. The keynote speakers are Ezra Nazim, Senior Fellow of Higher Education Academy UK, Professor Henk Gerald Sola, a Dutch organizational theorist and Emeritus Professor of Business, Engineering and ICT at Groningen University, the Netherlands. The National Council for Higher Education is receiving papers from researchers and scholars for publication in the Uganda Higher Education Review, Journal of National Council for Higher Education. For more details, send inquiries to cmuhumuza@unche.or.ug, info@unche.or.ug, or call 0783 040024 or 0704 800926 plus 256 39 32 62 140/4.
Every waking day is a reminder just how beautiful this, our land, truly is. The kind of beauty that you can only find here, in the lush green all around us and the wondrous sights within. It's in the distinct aroma of our cooking, to the taste of food that takes you on a journey, in the sound of homecoming and the sound of Mother Earth, in the magnificence we find on our travels and the exciting moments we experience. Ours is the kind of beauty that comes in all things big and small. All we have to do is awaken our senses and truly enjoy what's uniquely ours. Explore Uganda, the pearl of Africa.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Welcome back from that short commercial break. You're still watching Good Morning Uganda Extra, and we are looking at the Universal Periodic Review Report, where, just in case you've just joined, Uganda was reviewed at the UN Human Rights Council, that is in January this very year, to see how far we've gone into implementing, but also to see what we are taking on and what we are leaving. And now I want Sharon to take us through what did we take, what didn't we take, a summary.
Okay, so as a country we received 270 recommendations, and we supported 138 of these, and we took note of 132. So I'll just mention some of the recommendations that were accepted, and for those that were noted means like we did not take them on as a country. For those, it's continuous advocacy and follow-up, but for these that were accepted, we are sure that at least we'll follow through with the government to do something about them. So one of them is to continue implementing bills, regulations, and policies to further strengthen the rule of law and to promote human rights. So these, like the Uganda Human Rights Commission colleague has explained, are very important in ensuring human rights in Uganda. The other was to provide the Human Rights Commission, Mr. Kamadi spoke about it, to provide the Human Rights Commission, the Equal Opportunities Commission, and relevant line ministries with adequate financial resources and support measures and capacities towards improvement of these institutions. So there are recommendations that pertain to women, that pertain to health, that Alana was talking about. Uganda accepted a recommendation to continue to align its domestic legislation with international instruments, to continue and intensify efforts in promoting human rights of the vulnerable persons, to consider taking measures aimed at ensuring increased efficiency and accountability of public service. So there are several recommendations, very many of them, that we will be tracking through the different institutions. There are recommendations that geared towards albinism, promoting the rights of those people living with albinism. There are those that are geared towards eliminating gender-based violence among our women and families out there, recommendations on children, on education. So all these are what we look out for to continue engaging with the government and ensure that these processes are taken into. And actually, as previously discussed, some of these that you see are being done, like institutions in police. There were recommendations, of course, under civil and political rights to do with torture. There were recommendations to do with issues of LGBTIQ, that's the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. I think many of us Ugandans understand that, but many of those were noted by our government because some of the reasons given were that those are culturally not accepted among the people of Uganda. So those were noted. But for those that were accepted, and with time we have come to see certain changes. If you look at certain departments in police, certain departments like the Department of Human Rights, emphasis being put into that, and directorates being put in place. These are some of the discussions that have come along the way through these UN mechanisms and the review. The human rights where recommendations have been given that for you to improve this human rights situation, you need to do this and this. So that's why these processes are not futile. Some of these directorates that you see being put in place and being strengthened, and then they are the legal representatives of police and army wherever in the different parts of the country. You find human rights commission offices in different regions in Uganda. Some of these are to strengthen the human rights implementation in our country. So this follows some of all these accepted recommendations. There are so many, I'm not able to mention all of them, but they are available on the UN website, and they will soon be available on our websites for Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Yes.
Well, the public, we should interest ourselves in knowing what we really accepted too. Now, this brings me to Kamadi. I know one thing, that yes, the Uganda Human Rights Commission is doing a tremendous job, I must say. But most of the times when you look at issues of human rights, it is believed that we are good at rectifying. We are good at committing ourselves. But when it comes to implementation, that is where we go slow. So what are some of those achievements that you can say, this we have achieved? You know, it's not just saying we sit there, we are there. Sometimes we make periodic reports. One of the areas someone was saying that if you want to analyze Uganda performance, one of the things that when it comes to compensation of victims, that yes, court may award, the commission may say something about it, but if you look at how much government is all right now in terms of compensating victims, yet these are some of the things we go and ratify, even here when we have been talking about this periodical review where we assessed and where we made progress. So let's look at your achievements.
Thank you, Robert. You know, it's very easy to not appreciate what has been done if you don't have information. And that's why I said one of our roles is raising awareness. And there is a challenge within our population of generalizing. If one person maybe has had challenges and he has not been helped, then you generalize there is no work being done. But going to what you've said, quite a lot has been done. we now have a robust legal and institutional framework. You may say that is not specifically a mandate of the Commission to come up with the legal framework, but apart from that which was there from the initial beginning, a lot of advocacy has been done. For instance, the Human Rights Enforcement Act, which was just assented to by His Excellency the President in 2019, is one of the important pieces of legislation that buttresses the protection and promotion of human rights in this country. She talked about availing resources to economic, social rights. The Human Rights Enforcement Act has a provision that requires, to ensure that these economic and social rights are adequately financed, and one can go to court and challenge if there is retrogression or no much attention is being paid to it. So that is one of the important achievements that we have in place. We have now human rights directorates. For instance, the Directorate of Human Rights and Legal Services in the Uganda Police Force. We have the Directorate of Human Rights in the UPDF. We have worked on human rights training manuals for the Uganda Police Force, for the Uganda People's Defense Forces, but also the individual victims of human rights violations you are talking about. In our last annual report to Parliament, over 4 billion has been paid to victims of human rights violations. And on a daily basis, if people are free to come up and lodge their complaints of human rights violations. Speaking of the thematic focus now, the Universal Periodic Review, we have put in place a database that helps to populate recommendations made for the different MDAs to upload their action points and for anybody to be able to follow without walking into anybody's office. www.uhrc.database.ug. That is one also of the mechanisms that has been put in place to quicken monitoring, follow-up of actions, and ensuring that we are steadfast in ensuring the protection and promotion of human rights.
Well, I see time is shifting so fast, but Alana, moving forward, now we've entered the post-review period. How is your organization going to partner with government to see that they promote social and economic rights of Ugandans, giving successes, yes, but also challenges withstanding?
Yes. So ISA always believes that the devil is in the details. For me, you cannot commit to human rights like health, education, if I don't see financing improving, if I do not see that there is better monitoring, if we don't see, like the people should tell us, I don't believe in PR. Healthcare and education, when they are good, you will know. If people are food insecure, like right now, we know food security affects, if someone is poor, there's going to be an increase in crime. Right? And we can see that. So what we are going to do and what we did in 2016 was we work on these implementation matrices. And it may seem boring, but it's the same thing with the SDGs. You look at these indicators and you say, how are you going to measure progress? Don't come every day and give us the same statistics. I want to know from 2022 to 2023, what has actually happened? Did we have 0 regional cancer centers? Now do we have 5? Do we have a CT scan? Does it mean that in Rabachi, which had a bat-infested facility, I visited it, you have fixed it and now their facility.
So looking at how you're going to support.
Yeah. So that is in terms of the supporting is for us, we bring our expertise. In terms of one, we are aware of how to synergize with things like the SDG indicators and the government's indicators. We've been part of these processes for a long time, and to come up with these matrices that have indicators, that have clear baseline, have clear data, and facilitate convenings where government can sit and reflect on progress. And of course, as civil society, we also bring our shadow reports to those convenings and say, okay, you have said you increased funding for education, but actually your capitation grant is still here. You have said you're going to regulate fees, but you see now in third term, schools are busy raising fees, and if your child doesn't go for third term, they will not pass, and we haven't seen the statutory instrument yet. So it is both in terms of what are the best practices for monitoring this from a data perspective and indicators, making sure government is using similar indicators to their processes. You don't want government having separate indicators for UPR, now for health. They are busy people. They
so
must be harmonized.
Provide the expertise
yes,
and of course,
yes.
this technical information.
Yes,
now, Sharon,
popularize.
Time is not so much on our side, but of course I want to interest myself in knowing how civil society organizations participate, that is in the Universal Periodic Review, but also to understand how relevant are they to this process.
So civil society participates at different levels. For now that Uganda has just received, has just accepted certain recommendations, the main thing now is to sensitize the public. We take part in creating awareness so that the public gets to know, like we are doing now, what is the UPR, what are the recommendations that have been given. So following that, we monitor the progress of this implementation. If the government committed to this and this, how far have they gone? Actually, there's even supposed to be a mid-term report. We do not wait up to the end of the cycle, because then you realize that maybe something has not been done about certain processes. So as civil society, we do monitor that progress. Following, we have different clusters that pertain to all these recommendations. As a National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders Uganda, we played the lead role. We are the coordinating entity of all the CSOs in producing the shadow report to the UN Human Rights Council on the UPR. So as we monitor, we keep track and we document all the processes and what is going on and what is actually on ground, whether it's a health-related issue, what is the current situation on ground, like Alana was explaining, so that we inform and know this is how far we've gone. We create awareness as civil society. We have engaged civil societies across the whole country. They have even been part of this engagement that we have just concluded. Beyond that, we also compile our own shadow report, like I had said. So towards the end of the cycle or midway the cycle, we will compile a shadow report that tracks the progress of how these recommendations have been implemented. We continue to advocate and work together with the government. There are civil society organizations, for example, that are able to work on all. If it includes health, they are able to put that in place because they have resources. So we partner and ensure that some of these recommendations are being implemented because we have some of the resources, but also put the government to task to see that whatever has been accepted is, at least they're doing something about it. If you wait up to the end of the phase, you realize that nothing has been done about it. So we put the government to task. We continue to advocate. We come together and collaborate. We also generate, we document, we write reports. We have evidence to all this to show what is being done, what is the progress being made. If like the state produces its own report because this is a state-led process. But if they're saying this, about torture, what is the actual situation on ground? So we as CSOs, we also provide.
So the shadow report comes in for comparison. Yeah. And also
we do send our shadow report to the UN Human Rights Council that is considered also in the review process. Yeah, it's not only the state report, but the CSOs also provide their shadow report. So last year, we compiled the report, 2021 July. We coordinated over 200 civil society organizations to bring together information that generated that report to the UN Human Rights Council.
Well, I see we seemingly are on the right track when you look at this universal periodic review that happens after 4 years. And we see our country, Uganda, at the United Nations Human Rights Council presenting their report, but also now that also civil society organizations also provide a shadow report there. It is something that really we think we shall have more improvements. Kamad, let me have your parting shots in the interest of time.
Thank you very much. The protection and promotion of human rights is work in progress. For us here and the Commission, civil society, we undertake to continue following up these recommendations, monitoring and ensuring that action is taken. We shall continue with capacity building and raising awareness, and also offering redress to victims of human rights violations. But it is important for our listeners to also know that human rights are enjoyed in tandem with the duties and responsibilities. It's not enough to ask for your rights when you are also abdicating your responsibilities. The two go hand in hand. Unfortunately, a lot of attention is usually paid to asking for guaranteeing, which is okay, but we should also ensure that we fulfill our duties and responsibilities. I encourage the citizens to read Article 17 of our Constitution on the duties of a citizen. You should pay taxes. Before you demand for these services from government, have you paid your taxes? Yeah, so the duties and responsibilities are important. Cooperating with the law enforcement agencies, it is also under Article 17 of the Constitution. We see a lot of confrontations because in most cases, some of us don't want to fulfill our duties and responsibilities. So it is a balance sheet. It is a balance sheet. Play your role, then ask the government to also play its role. I thank you.
Well, I love that fact that you've emphasized duties and responsibilities. Many people think, yes, I am a human being, I'm not an animal, wildlife, so everything, as long as that is the end to it. But I'll just give just a minute to Alana as we wind up.
I just call upon Ugandans to make sure these are not things on paper, they're not UN things. They are things that affect your lives, whether you have food security, whether you have education, whether your old people are looked after through social protection or health. So I really encourage you to also join us in monitoring this situation. I know there's been a lot of outcry, and we know that outcry can shift things. We have seen that. In fact, if it was not for your outcry during COVID-19, who knows if we would have had, the regional oxygen plants and all kinds of things that had to be quickly put in place. It's because you counted and you shouted. So I hope you stand up and you speak out. As civil society, we are your allies, but we can only amplify your voice. I call upon government to continue to work with civil society to make sure that we have real indicators of progress. I truly believe we are fighting for the same country, a Uganda where everyone can live in dignity.
Well, thank you. And last but not least is Sharon, your parting shot.
Yes, I call upon all of us Ugandans to participate in this process. We are looking towards a coordinated and collaborative response mechanism. This cannot only be achieved by the state, as civil society, as religious leaders, members of parliament, that local woman in the village out there, document, tell us what is happening so that we can be able to provide that evidence to be able to move things. It may not be automatic that what you're pushing for now you have seen, but let's continue to have a record. Let's continue to have evidence. Let's not give up. Let's get up and stand up to the cause. And one day, if maybe not for us, at least our children will live a better life, because who knows, there are people who stood up and spoke, and that's why some of us benefited from the affirmative action where the universities were added points, and because of the efforts of someone else. So as Ugandans, let's not give up. Let's make use of these processes that are available. Let's put our government to task. And here, as Mr. Kamadi said, let's continue to be responsible, pay our taxes, but follow up to ensure that we benefit from whatever we are working for.
Well, I want to thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time and, of course, creating this awareness to Ugandans. I urge our viewers, take interest in knowing actually more. Where they said the website is there, go and find out what did we agree to or what didn't we. But human rights, we must all accept it's a process. It is work in process, but your input is very, very important. And of course, issues of prioritizing financing is something that we must do, but also ensure that we all respect one another. And remember, human rights are universal by virtue of being a human being, but they come with duties and responsibilities. Have a lovely day.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, This is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
The Universal Periodic Review is a process under the United Nations human rights system which involves the peer review of the human rights records of all United Nations member states every 4 years. As the coordinating entity, the National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders Uganda, in partnership with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, has organized a 2-day stakeholder engagement under the theme, the UPR in Uganda, towards a collective and coordinated action